Guys, my name's JD Clockadell. Joey Ashersby, you've heard him speaking before. It looks like we got some very familiar faces back. Today's about how to start any presentation, and Renita's actually added a great dynamic to it. It's not just what you say, but how you say it. So really good addition and flavor to that, something we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to turn it over to Joey to get things kicked off. Joey, go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, JD, and thank you for everybody for joining these calls. This is something that I know that you all know that we started since the beginning of the COVID crisis, and we've really enjoyed doing them, and I think we're going to continue doing them. So, of course, the topic today is how do we start any presentation? And I think a lot of you in the chat box have already sort of talked about that here. How do you start the presentation? How do you have a good opening statement? How do you capture the attention? Renita pointed out that you need to also start from the kind of style that's going to grab people's attention. Obviously, all the issue is you want to start your presentation in some way that really grabs the attention. And so I actually want to start this presentation with a story about how not to start a presentation. This is actually something that I experienced. I was invited actually to a Rotary Club meeting several years ago. And there was a lot of people there. There was several hundred people. It was a big Rotary Club. And they had invited somebody to speak. I don't really remember what the topic was, but I remember he had 15 minutes to speak. And he stood up there, and the first thing he did before he got really into his presentation, he started thanking people. And he thanked everybody at the beginning, of the people at the dais, at the top of the lectern, at the front. And he started thanking people in the audience. He started picking out people. He started thanking all these people. And he went on, of the 15 minutes of his presentation, I am not exaggerating, he thanked people for 5 of the 15 minutes. It was a horrible way to start your presentation. For me personally, of course, because I was invited to the Rotary Club. I didn't know anybody. And so it was just completely irrelevant. You need to start in a way that really grabs your attention, grabs the audience's attention. And so we're going to talk about some ideas around that today. There's 3 things in particular we're going to focus on. Number 1, we're going to talk about the idea that you need to listen to your audience first. And we're going to talk about what we mean by that. Second thing we're going to talk about is the idea that you need to start with the issue. And we'll talk about what we mean by that. And then finally, we're going to actually go over several sort of classic ways to open your presentation, such as telling a story or starting with a question, some different approaches that we think really work well. So let's start with the first one. Oh, by the way, as we go forward, please be sure to ask us questions. Go to the chat function. JD and I are going to both be sort of keeping one eye on the chat box. Jump in and ask questions. We're going to ask you questions from time to time, so we would love for you to participate by going, whenever we ask you a question, to go to the chat box and answer us. We may even call some people out individually, so don't be hesitant, don't be shy. So that's that.
Great, Joey. Now everyone's going to drop off their camera so they don't get called on.
Yeah, well, I understand. I understand that. They should have listened to our last webinar on how to look good on camera. All right, and by the way, you can all go and listen to that one. By the way, it's on our website. All right, but let's go to the first one, which is listen first. Now, what we mean by this idea of listen first, if you really want to grab, if you really want to grab your listeners' attention, you need to understand what they're interested in. And to do that, you need to call them up in advance. You need to call them up and you need to say, hey, this is Joey. I'm coming to speak to you next week on the following topic. Tell me what you're interested in. Tell me what about this topic is interesting to you. What about this topic concerns you? What are you worried about? You need to listen to your audience first. This is a very simple thing that we tell all of our clients to do. And it is one thing that if you did this one thing, I don't care how bad you think you are as a presenter, but if you did this one thing this is going to make your presentations dramatically better, and it's certainly going to help you get your listeners. It's certainly going to help you grab their attention early on. So let's use this. Let's take an example. JD, let's say that you're giving a presentation to somebody. What might be the topic that you would give a presentation on these days?
Well, the big one that's come up, and it's brought up by one of our clients. I've actually had 2 clients, 2 individuals actually pitching this. The topic is the workforce being able to choose whether or not they want to go back into the office or work from home, work virtually.
Yeah, I mean, in today's world, right, everybody is getting a real full taste of what it's like to work from home. And I think a lot of people really, really like it. So where would you give a presentation? Who would you give the presentation to, JD?
Well, these folks are actually giving presentations to senior leadership. Actually, I've seen what they refer to as kind of the EC, or the executive committee, which consists of HR. It has operations, all the senior leaders who have a stake in whether or not their business units do well in this new operating environment.
So what would you do if we say listen first? What would you do in this case to sort of take our advice and put it into practice?
Well, I mean, if you have a personal relationship with them, go to lunch with them, eat with them. If you've got time on their calendar, let's say you're going in on a Friday and you've got to give a pitch to the EC, you can either email them or meet them in person. Say, hey, I know I'm spending 20 minutes with you on Friday to talk about this topic, this idea I have. I'd like to hear what some of your concerns are about it. Flush it out that way. And actually, when I'm speaking, David Rundle said, listen to your audience first. Makes preparation easier or harder. So you definitely need to ask them, email them, meet with them, whatever it is prior to. But maybe let's take this question too. Does it make it easier or harder?
I think it definitely makes it easier because it helps really make sure that you're directing your presentation to your listeners' needs. So in this case, JD, if your listener said, if you go speak to the CEO of the company and you say, look, and he says, I'm fine with the idea. The number one concern that I have is productivity. If he says that, then what are you going to do?
The whole presentation should be focused on productivity.
Yeah, I mean, you're essentially asking your listener what it is that they want to hear, and then it allows you to sort of cut out all the stuff that you may think that they maybe want to hear and focus on the stuff that's just important to them.
Joey, let's bring up one other thing too that we talked about this, but we do hear this from clients a lot. I guess by a show of hands or ones in the chat box, how many people have been in a situation where they don't really have access to the audience, maybe a larger presentation, an industry event, or something that kind of pops up where you can't necessarily email those people? Have anybody been in those situations before?
Yeah, so we're getting a lot of people saying ones.
Right. Kristen Studebaker, yeah, so David, Julie. So a lot of us are faced with that where we go into an industry thing, maybe there's 100 people there. We can't talk to everybody. So, Joey, what do we do in those situations?
So when you have a large industry event, you definitely cannot speak to all the people that are going to be in your presentation, but you can speak to some of them. A year or so ago, I was asked to speak to a large industry event of software developers, and there were going to be 800 people in the audience. And obviously I can't speak to all 800, but I spoke, first of all, to the person who invited me, but I also said, hey, could you give me the names of 3 or 4 people that you know are going to be there and that kind of represent a cross section of the people, because I'd like to speak to them. And I spoke to them and they gave me some ideas and actually used a quote from one of them to start my presentation. So the idea is that, yeah, you can't speak to everybody, but you can get a sense. You can speak to a lot of people. So that's the idea. Let's go to the second issue I wanted to talk about, which is you need to start with the issue. So let's say that we've done our homework, we've called the CEO, the CFO, whoever it is that you're speaking to, and you've learned what is his or her issue. Now, how do you start your presentation? How do you grab them at the beginning? Well, I'll tell you, the way you grab them at the beginning is by you start with that issue. If they have told you that the number one thing that they're concerned with is productivity, then you'd say, I know that you need to start by addressing the issue of productivity and showing that you're going to talk about that issue of productivity. The analogy that we often use is storytelling and the way people tell stories, especially in a movie. This is a classic storytelling approach, is to start with the issue, not start with the background. Don't start with the introductions. Don't start with the org chart. You start with the issue. The example we often use is the movie Jaws. This is one of my favorite movies. I love the movie Jaws. My wife will see me sitting down watching television and she'll say, oh my God, you're not watching Jaws again. I love this movie because of the way it deals with the issue of storytelling. Those of you who've seen the movie, I know most of you have probably seen it. You know that the way the movie begins is that a woman goes swimming and in the first scene gets eaten by a shark. It's the first scene. There's no background. There's no org chart. There's no, before we get started, let me introduce all the key players or let me tell you about the history of the, no, none of that. Woman gets eaten by a shark. Boom. What do we have? We've got an issue. We've got an issue, which is swimmers are getting eaten by sharks. That's going to grab the attention. Well, in the case of the trying to get people to work from home, this idea of can we work from home, what's the issue? Well, from the client's perspective, from the listener's perspective, the issue is productivity. So JD, how might we most simply, if we just want to start our presentation in that case with a nice simple statement, how would we start our presentation?
With a simple statement, I do want to ask a question, kind of re-emphasizing the importance of this. Just by a show of hands, eyes, one's in the chat box. How many people have sat through a vendor presentation before? Okay.
See some hands going up.
Yeah, lots of people sat through them. It's kind of like, it's an easy one. So I want to ask, and you can unmute yourself and put it in the chat box. Usually it's the first 5 to 7 minutes of a vendor presentation. Who are they usually talking about?
Themselves.
Themselves.
Yeah.
Patrick, go ahead.
Their company.
It is. It's pretty standard. They all go to like some online university for crappy vendor presentations. And it starts off. It's standard format. They talk about my team, how long they've been in business, all the products and services they have. And then they have what I call the NASCAR slide. It's usually like the 4th or 5th slide where they have the logo of every company they've ever worked with. And it looks just like a NASCAR race car. And I always ask this, when you're sitting there listening to this crap, what are you thinking?
They're thinking they just attended. This is what they
James,
taught at their online university for crappy presentations.
I'm
right?
usually thinking about my Saturday morning tea time.
Yeah.
But we've all been there. We're sitting there going, geez, get to the point. What is this about? How are you going to help me? So that's why it's just so important to start this way, because no one cares about you. They care about getting their problem solved. So to answer Joey's question, the way, what time is lunch? I love that, Amanda. What time? This is not my problem. Get to the point. How's this help me? Yeah, all those great things. But the way I'd phrase it is probably what Joey and I would more refer to as just a straight, simple statement. So if I know that productivity is the core issue, and I've gleaned that from talking to the executive committee, the way I would start my presentation, and this is something Hideyoshi, I think I pronounced it right, close, but welcome back again, by the way, is I would start by having some conversational talk. Guys, thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to share this idea. Before I get started, I know that the biggest concern that you guys have expressed to me is that you are worried that productivity can go down if we keep up this virtual environment. Nice, simple, one sentence statement that articulates the issue.
Yeah, I think that this is a really underestimated way of starting your presentation. If you have done your homework and whoever you've spoken to in advance has told you that this is the issue, by starting your presentation by saying, look, you told me that the number one issue is productivity. I want to talk to you about that. You're going to have their attention. They're going to pay attention because they've told you already that that's what they want to hear about. It's almost a law of nature. And I think a lot of people sort of underestimate this. They think that they have to start with a sexy story or an interesting piece of data, which are all, and we're going to talk about those in just a second, which are great ways to start your presentation. But don't underestimate just the nice, simple, clean statement. I think this is really good. David Rundle says, starting with the issue problem, make sure that the train doesn't leave the station without the listener. David, would you unmute? David, would you unmute? Explain with that. I'm really intrigued by that.
Yeah, I'm a pastor, and I follow Andy Stanley, who's from Atlanta, and he emphasizes that a lot of times these pastors will get in the pulpit and will break out the Bible and start reading from it, and people just get lost and they don't really know why they're supposed to be listening to this. And what you're saying is that, if you start with the issue or the problem or whatever it is that is the hook that everybody's interested in the room, then that train isn't going to leave the station without the listener.
Yeah, it's a really good point. But I will say that you don't only have to start that way, of course. There are lots of different ways, and sort of the classic way. Well, a kind of a hook that we used is you can start, depending on the type of presentation, you could start by asking your audience a question, kind of like the way we did. We started by asking you guys what are the biggest challenges. But another classic way is with a story. And stories are really valuable. JD, why are stories good ways to start your presentation?
I mean, the way our brain works, they're just more engaging. Our brain grasps visuals of things. I mean, I think about this. Just by a nod of the head, or show of hands, or one in the chat box, how many people just in general find stories more engaging? Maybe you don't know why, but you just find stories to be more entertaining. I mean, yeah, I know there's just the way our brain works, and we all know that when we hear a good story, we're like, okay, that was good. You connect better with people. It makes things more real. It puts you in the moment. There's just lots of reasons stories make us really engaged.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why. There's actually a wonderful book a wonderful book that many of you may have read called *Sapiens*, Sapiens, and it's a book about the history of humans, the human race. And one of the things it talks about is how one of the things that made us such a dominant species on this planet is our ability to tell stories, because that allowed us to sort of get other people together with each other and made us sort of rally teams of people. And so telling stories is a really, really valuable thing. So let's go to your presentation here, JD, where you're pitching this idea that everybody should be able to work at home whenever they want. If we wanted to start our presentation, with a story, what might we do?
So again, I'm not even going to make up the example. I'm just going to use a real example from a client where I'll tell it as if I'm in that person. But if I was going to pitch that and say, well, I want to talk about one of the first things is the flexibility of working at home has made me more productive. I no longer spend 2 hours in traffic to drive from Milton down to downtown Atlanta, and it's allowed me to have more time in the office. And I've noticed that specifically that I'm not getting interrupted anymore by water cooler conversations or drop-bys or anything of that nature. And I've noticed that I'm actually working on more projects, and I'm able to get more projects out during the week than I ever got done in the week when I was actually in the office, because of the drive and because of all the interruptions that I get. And I'm just much more focused and much more productive at this point.
So this is a really nice story for a couple of reasons. Number one, because it's addressing the issue of productivity, which we know that our CEO and the senior level folks that are listening to this really care about. The other thing that's interesting is it addresses an issue that Trevor just brought up on the chat box, which is he made the comment here. The only time he doesn't like stories is when he's in the checkout line at the store and he has to listen to somebody's life story when he's trying to check out. Now, that's funny, and we definitely all relate to that. But I think it's also important to note that the stories that you tell at the beginning of your presentation should be short. JD has told a story, but he's told it in a tight way. I should tell you that he and I actually practiced before we were practicing before this webinar. And you should be practicing these stories, because if they're long stem winders, people are going to get sick of them. And you don't want that. So telling a story is really a good thing. And by the way, thank you, Trevor, for your comment. What about data, JD? A lot of people do like to start with data. What do you think about starting your presentation with that?
I think data is great if it has some context and if it really gets the point across.
All right. So give me an example of how we might use data.
Well, and I'm sorry, as I'm looking at the example that I was thinking of, again, one of the other clients was talking about a good piece of data, and it's kind of a story, but it's just a story with data. I could start the following way. We know your concern, so I'll start from the very beginning. Guys, thanks for having me here. I know the number one thing you guys have expressed to me is that your concern is about this kind of virtual environment is making sure people stay productive. I just want to give you a quick piece of data. We did some surveys, some employee engagement surveys throughout the company, and we found that 75 people want to work from home. But what I think is even more interesting is that 90% of those 75% of the respondents said they actually feel like they're more productive and more engaged in their work because of their having less stress being in traffic. And we had specific comments to the fact that they actually said, I am better off getting up in the morning the same time as I leave my house and starting work earlier and knowing that I don't have that stress in front of me, and they're just more engaged, so they're willing to be more productive at work.
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice little piece of data. One of the things that you'll see that JD did there is he took the data, but he made it part of the story too. It's, usually data by itself is, if you just give just the data, usually it can be kind of puzzling. So you want to make sure that you're giving some context to that data, as JD said. So that's another good one. What about a question? A lot of people like to start with questions, JD.
Has anybody here ever started a presentation with a question? I love doing that. Who is that? David, you mind unmuting yourself? What kind of, give me a context of a presentation and a question you have asked.
Well, I mean, once again, I don't want to monopolize the conversation. I'm a pastor, and so asking a question like, you ever struggle with such and such, and it's a good thing, that Jesus actually addressed this, and then we just jump into whatever the solution is,
Okay, so you're asking that, Renita. You said you do. What's a typical question you might ask your participants?
Go ahead and unmute
yourself, Renita.
Sorry about that. So much of my class is around cyber security. So we'll begin the class by asking what their cyber issues are. And then again, ask the question, bring up the issues, and then our instructors are able to sometimes just adjust on the fly and answer those questions.
We're getting to the core issue, right? I think one thing that a question does is very similar story. It connects with the brain a certain way. If I ask a question like what I would typically ask for this type of presentation, I might just say, how many of us in this room have been stuck in Atlanta? By the way, is most people from Atlanta? Because traffic sucks here. Well, it doesn't anymore. It's great. You can pretty much get anywhere now. But when it was normal, traffic was awful. I don't know if you've been to LA. Let's think of LA, traffic right there. But I might start off and say, look, I know most of us live outside of where we work here, but how many of you have been stuck in traffic multiple times during the week and been super frustrated and actually been late to the office? And chances are you're going to get people that do what? Yeah, I've been there. Now you've got a connection with them, kind of just like a story. You're helping put them in that moment and kind of feel what you're trying to convey. So questions are super, super powerful. Plus, what I like questions for is it gets your audience engaged in the presentation right off the bat. They are now aware that this is a participatory thing. This isn't just to sit back and stare at you. So now you're getting a good start because now your audience is going, oh, God, okay, wait a minute, I got to be involved in this. I'm going to respond. I get to be a part of this. So there's a great way to get that start of the presentation going.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to start your presentation. My good friend Josh, tell us. Why don't you unmute and tell us about this one that you just mentioned? Josh, you there? He may have dropped off.
Josh is on mute, wrestling with his headset.
All right, we'll keep going. But Josh actually Josh works with attorneys, and how do your clients show that they value you or don't? And this is a good way to start your presentation if you're speaking to them, trying to help them understand that. So these are all good ways to start. There's another good way to start your presentations with an analogy. Sometimes analogies can be really powerful ways to sort of illustrate an idea. This is something that, frankly, here at SpeechWorks, we use a lot. Obviously, we give presentations to clients, and we're trying to help them learn how to connect better with their audiences. And so we will start with the following analogy. We'll say, we know you're trying to connect with your audiences more effectively. And so to get you started, I'd like to start with an analogy that we sort of think goes to the heart of great communication. I live here in Atlanta, and I drive around town a lot, and I live not too far from a bridge that has a weight limit. And I live, I'm driving around, I come to this old bridge, and the bridge has a sign that says weight limit 10 tons. And I'm sure many of you have seen these weight limit signs. Well, I was just curious one day, and so I went on the internet and I Googled bridges with weight limits. And it's interesting, that every year dozens of bridges collapse because truckers, they come to the bridge, they see the sign, they know that they know that they're in a truck that's too heavy for the bridge. And so what do? Well, they go across the bridge anyway often, and the bridge will collapse. Now, what does this have to do with us? Well, I think you have to realize that the medium that we're working with is a lot like a bridge with a weight limit. This is a limited medium, and the people that are good at this, they think about the limits of the medium. And one of the things you have to think about in terms of the limits of the medium is to realize that it's just limited, that you can't get too much information across. And so that ultimately the goal is not to tell people everything, but just to connect. And so what we say is it's about connection, not perfection. In fact, I have it on a sign right behind my desk here. It's about connection, not perfection. And so the analogy is, of course, that bridge analogy we use. So there's a lot of different ways that you can start your presentations. So that's the idea here. So we're coming towards the end here. I want to make sure that we get to any questions. Does anybody have any questions about anything that we've covered? Let's see here. We had some. Paul said, used to be with a firm that always started with a safety moment. Interesting, but somehow a bit awkward. Paul, I'd love for you to tell me a little bit more about that. That sounds really interesting. Paul, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I'm learning. I'm sitting under a skylight, and I keep getting reflections off of my computer, so I know this wouldn't really be the right location to really do a call. But the firm I was with, I'm not going to say the name, they always did a safety moment, and it was usually good information. But they started every meeting they had internally or with clients with that, and it just sort of felt like, I don't know, it just felt almost that it was almost a little bit trying too hard, or trying to say that we really care for our employees, but is it that, or is it just trying to be less worry about being sued, or so I don't know. To me, it just felt a little strange. I liked what they were doing, but it was also just
Yeah, well, it didn't get to the heart of what they were there for. It was sort of it was a little bit of a distraction. So yeah, I can see how that would not be particularly interesting. Two questions just came up sort of back to back. Thoughts on icebreakers, and then anything particularly dangerous to use as an opening. It's interesting. One of the things that people often do ask is, should I start my presentation with a joke? Should I start with a lot of people have heard, it's good to start with a joke. I will tell you, we're not big on that. We think you probably should not start with a joke for several reasons. First of all, there's actually several reasons. Number one, most of the jokes that you hear at the beginning aren't funny. So that's one reason not to do them. Usually they're not relevant. Occasionally they're offensive. And so we tell people just stay away from jokes if you really want to. And especially in a business context, I don't think people come to presentations in business because they want to be entertained in the way that a joke is intended to entertain. Every once in a while it might work, but you're taking a risk. You're taking a risk by doing that. JD, Tom has asked a question. How do you recover from somebody else's bad start? So if you're in presenting as a team, somebody else gets up, they start off poorly. What do we do then?
Well, let's back up for a second. Before you get to that point, you need to rehearse. You got to rehearse. Most people don't. In my opinion, if you got to that point, this battle's won before you get there. You gotta rehearse. But let's just say you couldn't for some reason, and it was really, really, really bad. I don't know. I'm just going to ask, Renita, you train for a living. What if someone's bad? What's the only option you have when you get to present?
Okay, so I actually had this happen one time, and I followed somebody, and I was very nervous because they were the subject matter expert. But I go back to the energy and style, and I connected with the audience when my previous speaker did not. It was just lecture. I came in and I started off my presentation asking them a question, and I moved out from around the podium, which, we still have a little bit of that in our virtual environment. But the energy level that I brought the whole room, that somebody told me later, the body language of every person in that room changed when I get up to speak. So in my opinion, it's great,
That's all you can do. I mean, you can look at it as a gift from the other speaker. She set the bar really low, and you got nowhere to go but up. I mean, you can't go, hey, by the way, I know Renita sucked, so hopefully I won't. I mean, you can't do that. But I mean, literally, it is the only thing you can do is be positive, be energetic, connect with the audience, and start off. Make your kickoff really well. Start your presentation good. Ask a question. Have a good story that relates to everybody. Have a good analogy, or just simply get going and say, I know you're here because of blah, blah, blah. Let's talk about that. That's it. I mean, I guess there's other question here. I think I thought this one was worth just mentioning before you. I think we might have missed it, but icebreakers. I don't know. I was in a meeting. I'm not a big fan of icebreakers because I was in a meeting with like 100 people and someone goes, okay, everybody stand up. And we all stood up and they go, everybody shake yourself out. I was like, why are we doing this? This is pointless. Just go. Start talking. Your icebreaker should be the fact that you've got a lot of energy when you start. You've got a great story, a great analogy. You just simply state the fact that you understand why everyone's there and what their core issues are. That's how you get everybody going right off the bat. You don't need tips and you don't need tricks to do this. So I want to make sure we answered that question. So, Joe, I think we're at the 12:30 mark.
All right.
Yes, we are.
We're about done. Somebody just asked, did we record this? Yes, we recorded it. So you will be able to hear. We will send this recording out to everybody and obviously send it around if you'd like. The three things that we covered. First of all, the most important thing is how do you open? You need to open in a way that grabs your listeners. And so we've talked about three things. The first thing, if you really want to grab your listener, you need to understand your listener. And that means you need to listen to them first. And then you need to make sure you start with the issue. And then we talked a lot about the different ways of starting your presentation. Stories, questions, simple statements, data, analogies. All of those things are good, but just make sure that those things are addressing the key issues. So thank you all for being on this call with us. We've enjoyed it. We enjoy doing these things, and we will continue to do them as we go forward. And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.